Hello and a very warm welcome to Moneycontrol. I'm Shweta Punj. The government yesterday introduced the Telecommunications Bill, which had been in the works for several years. And of course, after a lot of deliberations, the government has finally made a last minute entry in the order of business on Sunday and they introduced it in the House on Monday. Expectedly so, it's evoked mixed reactions from across industry stakeholders. While there are many who are saying that the definition of telecommunications needs to be discussed further, there needs to be greater clarity. There's some who are hailing the move, hailing the bit on spectrum allocations, making a comeback. To understand what does this telecommunications bill mean for the Indian telecom sector, what does it mean for our privacy, for the citizens of India, what does it mean for telecom service providers? I'm joined by a very expansive panel that we are hoping would cover all aspects of this bill. I have with me Mr. Kumar, who is the country director of ITI. ITI represents all the global big tech companies like and so on. We have Parag Kar, a telecom industry veteran who has written extensively on the sector and who's been part of this sector's growth story. We have Sandeep Bhargava with us, who was earlier with Vodafone Idea, and we have with us Ritesh Bhatia, who is a cybersecurity expert. So thank you very much to all of you for taking out the time and joining us today. Let me begin with you, Parag. Parag, I saw what you wrote about the telecom bill and how you think a lot of it takes the telecom story forward and brings in a lot of reforms. I just want to understand a little bit more about what has changed in terms of spectrum. Now, we are talking about spectrum allocation making a comeback, which is a move away from spectrum auctions. Now, we know that this was a contentious issue. The courts had completely done away with the spectrum allocations that had happened during the 2G time. So just tell us what has changed in that.
See, the spectrum allocation, initially, if you recall, as you said, that, we had a mechanism of administrative allocation of spectrum bundled with the license. And then that changed with the Supreme Court judgment in 2012, where that under the umbrella of 2G scam, there was a perception that all spectrum to be given to the mobile operators should be auctioned. Now, the problem with that approach is that the auction is definitely a method which is transparent, but under every circumstance, an auction may not work. Auction always works when the demand is much more than supply. It typically happens with access spectrum, because if you look at access spectrum, you will find that those are spectrum which are exclusively used and to be used and given to the operators so that they can have full flexibility to deploy equipment so that they can harness maximum capacity out of the spectrums with no interference. However, there is a category of spectrum which is a little different. For example, backhaul spectrum, which are not supposed to be given to the operators for exclusive use because that leads to a lot of inefficiency. Similarly, satellite spectrum also falls into the category because satellite spectrum is a shared resources. Now, if you start giving this spectrum for exclusive use, that creates a lot of inefficiency. And what the government has done through this bill is they have aligned with this approach, which is an international best practice which they follow, and they give these kind of spectrum administratively so that the spectrum can be harnessed, the capacity of the spectrum can be harnessed with full efficiency, and which is not only in the interest of the consumer but also in the interest of the government and the service provider. Because if you give these spectrum on an exclusive basis through an auction process, it leads to a lot of inefficiency and it will restrict the usage of spectrum, which is a scarce resources and should be used in the maximum, in the interest of the country, so that spectrum does not get waste. That's the major change in this particular bill.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to the charges that the government could ask for the usage of the spectrum. Let me go across now to Kumardeep. Kumardeep, we were talking yesterday, and you were mentioning how the definition of telecommunications remains a little vague at this point, which is leading to some amount of anxiety.
That's right, Shweta. So, as we have been trying to grapple with, so first of all, as an industry body, as a technology and trade body, which represents the entire expanse of the tech sector, we would like to welcome the new telecommunications bill, but because the earlier references to the expansion of telecommunication services, which had been explicitly been put in the 2022 draft, have been removed. So in the September or August 2022 draft, which the government had come out with, which was initially the first draft, what we saw was that telecom services would also include OTT services, and thereby there was some sort of a licensing mechanism which was being suggested. So those kind of explicit references which had expanded the scope of telecom services has not been mentioned in the current draft. Having said that, just by the omission, it also perhaps leaves the door wide open for a regulation of platforms or OTT services at a later stage, because there is no explicit mention. So while we are reviewing the document right now, we also seek from the government a far greater consultation. Remember, the DPDP bill, the other important piece of legislation in this entire framing of the digital framework for India, or for the digital Nagrik, the DPDP bill went through an extensive rounds of consultation before it became an act. We are looking forward to, and this telecommunications bill was a surprise this week when it was sprung up on Monday, when we hadn't heard about it. I am sure, Shweta, you might not have also heard about it. And if I'm given to understand the House business properly, it's scheduled for passage on Wednesday. So that leaves very little room even within the Parliament for the bill to be discussed. Even if we set aside the fact that half of the Parliament MPs, or maybe 1/4 of them, have been suspended. But that's a political issue. We will not touch upon it. But having said that, what we are requesting is go through another round of consultation process before you get into the rulemaking process,
Right,
so that some
right.
of these are clarified. Shweta?
Sure. Let me bring in Sandeep here. Sandeep, you know, I, Vodafone, all the major telcos have been in discussions with the government on the spectrum allocation bit, and they were, while one group of telecom companies were pushing for spectrum auctions to continue, another was pushing for spectrum allocation. I want to get a sense from you on how does this move benefit telecom companies, and which specific companies do you think stand to gain the most with this?
See, as Parag already mentioned about the efficiency which the administrative part brings in versus the auction part. But in the overall context, I would like to say and seek the past which has happened, and the government and the Supreme Court came out with auction as the only process except for few areas. I think spectrum by auction is the most preferred method. You can define synergies, you can bring in best practices within auctioning itself. So now at a stature where the satellite companies were really asking for administrative basis, and the telcos are given on auction basis, I think this will be a very much unlevel field which will happen between the two. And as you see in the reforms, the first thing which is mentioned about is the authorization of the telecom related activity. So you have to get a license for everything what you do. But when you get a license and then you try to get into two folds, that one has got a license, but he has to obtain it through auction route. Other fellow also has a license, but he gets it as a cakewalk. In a beauty contest, he gets it, or an administrative process. So this becomes a very unlevel field between the two, and it will bring in a lot of challenges in terms of the working profitability and operations of telcos versus the satcom companies who are trying to bring in satellite for their purposes in this country.
Right. So just to get a sense, the companies, Indian companies that are looking at bringing satellite communication services into India, we have Bharti Airtel with OneWeb, but then you have Amazon and some other global companies. Can you just throw some light on that, please?
Yeah, certainly. If you see, there are two satellite companies lobbies which has been working around, and one is which is Bharti led, one is the other one, and also IMI has been supporting this satellite piece as a not to be auctioned and should be given on an administrative basis. So definitely, companies behind them or company members who are there for these, especially, will gain out of it, and they welcome this decision that administrative spectrum allocation will be better for them. But definitely,
So
it
how does
creates
this
a real path.
Right. So this is my question to all, to maybe you and Parag both. On how does this pan out for end users? If a telecom company gets the spectrum on an allocation basis, what's in it for me, Parag?
See, look, again, let me, I think, clarify, and I think then the debate will be much more useful. See, what is the purpose of allocating spectrum in by one method or the other? What the principle which should anchor this decision? See, in my point of view, there are few principles which we should talk about. The first is that definitely the question of level playing field is there. You should not be giving spectrum through one mechanism to somebody and some mechanism to somebody else. But the most important paramount concern the government should have, which is in the interest of the consumer, is the efficient use of resources and the market becoming competitive. So that, because if the resources are not efficiently used, who is going to suffer? The nation as such is going to suffer. Let's understand that. And the
Sure.
consumer is not going to get the best utilization of services because his choice is going to get restricted, and the operator's ability to operate with full flexibility and unlock the full value of spectrum will get hampered. So that is very important. So let's understand from this particular principle what the current context of this debate is. Like, there are two types of services. One is terrestrial services, another is satellite services. Now, the terrestrial and satellite services cannot be compared with each other. Now, whoever is making a comparison of terrestrial and satellite services probably needs to look at the business case of both the services. In case of terrestrial services, the device prices are pretty low and the cost of providing services are pretty low. Let me explain what I mean. Now, if you look at the devices cost of terrestrial services, the end devices, they will typically cost 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees. But a satellite terminal is going to cost you 50,000 rupees, right? That is the satellite discs which are currently being offered. And the service prices are also pretty high, and the broadband speeds are also pretty low. For example, if you look at the services which are being offered, the end user services which are being offered by Starlink, you'll find an uplink speed of not more than 10 mbps because of the size of the disk. So these are technical things which I don't want to get into. What I'm basically trying to say is that when anybody is saying that there is an unlevel playing field as far as the satellite and the
Right.
terrestrial services are concerned, you need to understand that there is no way you can compare these two services because these two services are distinct in nature from the point of view of end devices, throughput, everything. So they are not similar in nature. So that is very important to understand. Second point is that if you start giving spectrum through auction for satellite services, what will happen is, because these are shared resources, there will be a lot of spectrum which will go waste. Why I'm saying so is because satellite services needs the full block of spectrum to work. Is
Sure.
everybody needs the full block. It is not segmentation of spectrum into different compartments like we do for terrestrial services, because
Right.
they are operating in full block of spectrum and they are able to unlock the full potential of that particular block, whereas satellite people are not able to do that because
Mhm.
the number of satellites are very low, maybe 20 satellites hanging on the top of the earth or that particular moment of time for India, or when they're offering services, versus a billion base station. So imagine the kind of frequency reuse capability that terrestrial operators have versus satellite operators. That is the reason why it is important to assign satellite services in a manner to unlock full competitiveness of the market and ability to utilize the spectrum in the fullest manner possible, which is not possible through the auction mechanism because
Sure.
auctions are typically exclusive in nature. That's in short I want to basically mention.
Right. Okay. Let me go across to Ritesh. Ritesh, cybersecurity has been at the heart of many discussions. What does this bill have for ensuring better cybersecurity for Indians?
Well, one thing what I see, I mean, there's a plus to it and then there is a minus to it also, wherein they have made the biometrics compulsory. Actually, initially also, if you see, there was this particular judgment from the Supreme Court, and then they had said also that, Aadhaar shouldn't be made compulsory and biometrics especially, it need not be made compulsory. So now it is going to be made compulsory if you want to obtain a new SIM card. Now this is just
Mhm.
going to create a lot of issues. It's going to just create little problems for these cyber criminals, which are exponentially rising. It's just not the cyber crimes that are rising, Even the cyber criminals are rising. You see now 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, they are getting into it because of the ease of obtaining many of those things. So it is just going to get little difficult for them. And I wouldn't say that it is going to reduce, but yes, it will become quite difficult for them. But at the same time, we've also seen how our biometrics have been misused, especially when you have, if you have gone and submitted your fingerprints. I'm not saying like on the device. I'm not talking about the USB device. I'm saying, where you put it on the stamp pad and you have put it up over there, and those fingerprints have been lifted, and Aadhaar has been misused in the Aadhaar-enabled payment systems. So here again, I see there could be a rise in crimes wherein, let's say, Shweta, you go over there to get a new SIM card, and you give or you've lost your SIM card, and again it will be required, and you just put your biometrics over there. It's very easy to lift it from that acrylic sheet or the glass sheet which is there on the USB device. And hence a word of advice to the users that whenever they use their biometrics anywhere, make sure that you take out your handkerchief and then just clean it up over there. So this is one thing where I see, okay, things will be like minimized as far as certain cyber crimes are concerned. And the other thing is like the ads and the promotional messages. So again, cyber criminals use these advertisements or promotional messages and then send you fake links, which when you click on it, then there's an APK file that comes up. You install the malware. So, but they also have mechanisms to bypass it. I just wish the government could have made it much more strict about it as to what do they really mean by it, because most of these, like the scams that are happening, they also come via SMSs. It's not that it has reduced. You must have got something that your electricity bill, that your electricity will be disconnected.
Right. Yes.
So it's not just through WhatsApp, it's come through the SMS also. So we need certain things to be taken care of over there.
Okay, so some loose ends and fairly serious loose ends to tie up there. This is my question to Kumardeep and to all of you actually. The bill allows the central government to take over the control and management of or suspending the operation of any or all of any communication services or any telecommunication network or part connected with telecommunication services by notification in the interest of national security, friendly relations with foreign states, or in the event of war. Now, this has led to a lot of unease. There is a sense that individual liberty is getting compromised, privacy is getting compromised. So, I just I want to bring in Kumardeep on this. Kumardeep, what is ITI's assessment of this particular provision in the bill?
That's right, Shweta. We have been internally debating it, and as I mentioned earlier, we are reviewing the document. It is slightly early because the bill was introduced 24 hours back, so we are reviewing it. Also, you must remember that it is the holiday season in most of Europe and in US, therefore it might take a little more time, and which is why we are saying that let us get into another round of robust public consultation so that we understand the various provisions clearly. I'll refer to another point. There is a clause 22 which mentions that the central government may by rules provide for the measure to protect and ensure cybersecurity of telecommunication networks and telecommunication services. The measures may include collection, analysis, and dissemination of traffic data that is generated, transmitted, received, or stored in the telecommunication networks. Now, not all telecom networks belong to the government. What if there is a third party involved, or if there is a foreign player involved? Which may not be, because there are several parts in the telecom network which are not really license holders. What if they are subjected to share their data? Those are the questions that we need to answer. Secondly, I think on the cybersecurity part, there have been, I was reading also some of the reports, there have been concerns raised with regard the biometric authentication for providing telecom identifiers, or to say for providing new connections in a simpler language. So that means And the Supreme Court really has not has the judgment which was being referred to 2018 judgment. It is not mandatory to share your biometric authentication for getting or for obtaining a SIM card, or as simple as or a new connection. And we still do not have the proper privacy legislation in place, which will provide the consumer with that, bound kind of rules and regulations that if your data is shared, if your biometrics are getting leaked, how will you be protected? What happens in that case? So these are some of those details which need to be thrashed out, perhaps at this stage or perhaps at the rulemaking stage. So this is what are some of the concerns that we are raising.
Sure. Thanks for that, Kumardi. Parag, I'd like you to come in here. Do you see this as a red flag, or is this a departure from what we've always had in the past, or do you see this as continuation of the old policy that was there in the Indian Telegraph Act?
So look, if you look at the draft bill of 2022, because the draft bill of 2022 was put out in the public domain and was in discussion for a long period of time. The clause is exactly the replica of that clause, which is already there in the draft 22 Act. So it is nothing new which has come in here. It is already there in the draft. Though that particular draft was not in action, it was just for public consultation. So it was in the draft as it is. But what Kumardi was saying is definitely there is some kind of restrictions should be placed. You should not have full empowerment to do whatever you like, to access even private data. But you can't stop the government to basically take emergency measures in case of situations which are of emergency nature. But
is this the case in other countries as well? And this is my question to all of you.
See that I really have not studied in every market, so I will be lying if I basically make a statement like that. But what I can say is very, very clearly is that the definition of emergency probably needs to be defined with a little bit more clarity. Because when you have some harsh provisions like this, where you take control over everything which is there under the sun of that country's jurisdiction, then you have to be very cautious while you exercise those powers.
Okay. Yes, Sandeep,
absolutely. I agree with Parag on that. Sorry. Go ahead.
So, Shweta, two important aspects as far as the takeover of the networks is concerned and specifying standards for the equipment to be used. I think this will put a lot of onus onto the operators in terms of the cost, because if you make the standards, specify them that this has to be the product which has to be supplied in India, for example, it will become very tough for the equipment providers to make these equipments of this nature and supply it to the government. So making it to the India stack or India specific will become a cost-effective, cost-burdening process. That is number one. Number two, when you're talking about taking over the networks, I think it's not an easy task. We have to really put the modalities in place, the operations, because it involves a lot of things. It doesn't happen that somebody goes to the NOC or the control center of a particular operator and sits over there and operates the network. It will never happen. It will lead to things like source code, which happened around 10, 12 years ago. Government sought source code, but the equipment providers were not willing to provide it because nowhere in the world the source code has been given to the government. So how will this happen? How the modalities will work out? What kind of steps and procedures and processes will be laid out to really operate a network when there is something very important for the government to take it over? So all these modalities, all these operational challenges have to be defined, whether the operators, representatives will be into that kind of operations or not, who will be there, who will not be there. I think these are many things which are open and really need to be thought over before these acts or the rules are implemented in this country.
So this is a big, this could be a big compliance issue. Yes, Kumardi, go on.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I completely agree with what Parag and Sandeep have been saying. So the 19 set of conditions under which the government can, or conditions under which the government can take over a telecom network. And mind you, why I'm saying this, why I'm bringing this up is because it appears in the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill as well, and it will have its resonance somewhere in the Digital India Act, which is yet to become a reality, or the draft of which we are yet to see. But what we are seeking, because some of these terms are hugely ambiguous, and therefore they need to be more narrowly defined so that the scope of a government stepping into the private sector and taking over does not arise. For example, despite the fact that maintaining friendly relations with neighbors, maintaining peace in a certain region, have to be perhaps narrowly defined. I'm not saying that these are the only ones which need to be narrowly defined, but the more we narrowly define some of these conditions, the better it is for the government, and it saves us from going the litigation way.
Right. As a citizen, what I worry about is giving telecom companies access to my biometrics. How do I know whether they'll be able to keep it safely? It's just putting out your information in this whole, in this cloud, where we know that cybersecurity is still not as tight as one would like for it to be, and we constantly get to hear stories about data leaks happening from government databases. So this is private sector.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Shweta, if you see, even from the private sector, there have been multiple breaches that have happened. In fact, in one of the latest breaches, which was attributed to a medical research organization, I feel it was not through a medical research, but the data what I saw over there, where we said like a data of 81 crore people is there. I thought it is more about of several telecom providers which have been compiled and are being sold. And just 2 days back, the arrests also have been made. And now the fact will come out whether it was of ICMR or whether it was of the telecom providers. So the telecom providers also have to take cybersecurity very, very seriously, which I feel they do. But even as like Kumardeep was saying earlier about the third parties, it is more about the third parties. What are we doing about that? Because whether it is manufacturing, whether it is pharmaceutical, or whether it is telecom, our nation is always dependent on these small to medium businesses, and these are the third parties where the cybersecurity is like really, really bad. I mean, when you are calling the customer care center, do you think you're actually speaking to somebody at Vodafone or Airtel or Jio? No, it's a third party to where the phone is going. When you're looking for a SIM card, it is again the third party. These are small offices with 7, 8 people or 15, 20 people, and this particular data is sold. And now, to come to your question about, your concern about the biometrics, please remember these biometrics are encrypted, and I hope they are encrypted because none of us have seen it when we, at the Aadhaar end, they say the hash, it is stored as a hash, so you don't have to like really worry about it. But the fact is, when you are going to give your biometric at any of these telecom provider, they are really not going to capture your fingerprints as such. They're just going to match it with and get it authenticated at the UIDA database, and if it matches, it goes ahead. But as I told you, we just need to be very careful of not leaving those fingerprints behind, because the moment you will go out, somebody else, and I'm especially talking about in the remote areas and in small villages, before somebody comes, these guys will lift those fingerprints and they will again take one SIM card. And we are
Right. So
allowed 10
lots
SIM
of
cards for Aadhaar. Yeah.
right. So lots of loose ends to tie there. Very quickly, one good thing about the bill and one negative about the bill that you think needs to be sorted. Sandeep, very quickly. I'm just completely out of time.
So good thing is that all the three acts which were there earlier have been combined into one. So that's a positive way. Hopefully something better comes out. And the negative part is we need to really put the operational piece as soon as possible along with the act. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for people to follow it. And there are multiple challenges already which are there in the country. Like we have a trusted product, trusted source, and top of it something new comes up. So we have to align these properly and make it a seamless way for operations for the networks, for the telcos.
Okay, great. Parag?
See, I would say the following. The bill has been drafted in such a way that it has given the government full flexibility and empowerment to draft. So what will happen is that the details will come out when the rules are drafted. The devil is always in the details. But the bill is fully empowered to ask the government to draft rules properly and with full flexibility. That's what I think about this.
Okay, Kumardeep?
Yeah, we find that it has done away from the 2022 hangover. But again, as my co-panelists have been telling, that there are lots of loose ends which need to be tied, and it would be the details, the rule making, for which a consultation, a robust consultation is needed, will
Sure.
decide how this legal framework comes up.
Okay, Ritesh?
Well, a good thing is about the lesser SIM cards. I mean, these fake people getting the SIM cards and all that, that will reduce as such. But the negative part is about the government taking over the control of the network and privacy. That's the biggest negative for me.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you so much for joining us and decoding this very, very crucial legislation that will impact all our lives. Of course, we'll keep tracking this story on moneycontrol.com. Thanks so much, viewers, for tuning in. Do send us your questions, thoughts, and feedback on Money Control. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.